At my sister's baby shower, everyone snickered behind my back, saying I'd never know what real family truly means. I walked out without saying a word. 2 weeks later, an eviction notice showed up, and that's when they finally realized I was the one paying the bills the whole time. You know, there are some wounds that just fester in silence, the kind that bleed slowly over years until you're just an empty shell. For most of my life, I was that shell, an invisible force holding up a family that never truly saw me. But when their casual cruelty finally broke me, they learned the hard way that the quiet ones often hold the most devastating power. My name's Nathan, I'm 28, and I used to be the quiet one. Not because I didn't have opinions, but because I learned early on that in my family, silence was just safer. It was me, my mom, my older sister Lily, and my grandma, all squeezed into the small, sturdy house my grandpa left behind. My dad had been gone since I was 8, and while that hit me hard, I learned to cope. Lily, though, she took his absence as a personal mandate to become the golden child, and my mom clung to her like she was the last thread holding her together. Me? I was just there. Quiet, reliable, convenient when they needed something, invisible when they didn't. As I got older, I did what I thought was right. I kept my head down, worked hard, and stayed out of trouble. College wasn't even a conversation. We didn't have the money, and honestly, no one encouraged me to go anyway. So, right out of high school, I started taking part-time jobs, warehouses, gas stations, deliveries. I was always moving, always working, never asking for a thing. My family never offered either, but they were always more than happy to accept my help when bills piled up or Lily wanted something she couldn't afford. And oh, that happened a lot. Lily floated through life like the world owed her a parade. She'd switch majors 3 times, then drop out and take a break while I worked double shifts. Every time she cried about rent or car payments, Mom would guilt-trip me into being the good brother. And I always was. Even when I had to sleep on a futon in the living room so Lily could have her own space for a few months. Even when I worked through the flu because someone had to pay the water bill and grandma's medication in the same week. I never complained out loud, never snapped. But that quiet kind of resentment, the one that builds drip by painful drip, that's the worst kind. You start out just trying to do the right thing. Then one day, you wake up and realize you've disappeared completely from your own life. You're just a paycheck and a spare pair of hands. When Lily got pregnant, it was chaos at first, crying, shouting, the usual storm. But by the end of that week, Mom was gushing about becoming a grandma, and Lily was already deep into Pinterest for nursery ideas. I didn't say much. I congratulated her, offered to help, and went back to work. I thought, maybe, just maybe, this would change things. Maybe motherhood would humble her a bit. Instead, it only made the spotlight on her shine even brighter. The baby shower was at our house. They went all out. Pink balloons, streamers, flower walls, a whole table of cupcakes. I chipped in for the decorations and the catered food, quietly, of course. They didn't ask, but I knew Mom couldn't cover it all, and I didn't want Lily stressing. I wired the money, stayed out of the way, figured that would be enough. The day of the shower, I showed up a little late after a long shift. I was exhausted. My clothes still smelled faintly of oil and cardboard, but I cleaned up as best I could. I brought a gift, nothing flashy, just a solid baby carrier I knew would last. When I walked in, no one really greeted me. A few people nodded. My mom was showing off the cake to one of Lily's friends, and Lily barely glanced over before turning back to her crowd of bridesmaid-looking guests. I didn't expect a grand welcome. I was used to being overlooked. But what got me wasn't the cold shoulder. It was the laughter. It started when I walked past a small group near the kitchen. One of Lily's friends whispered something, then laughed behind her hand. Another said loud enough for me to hear, "He's cute," in a scrappy rescue dog kind of way. I paused, but kept walking. Maybe I misheard. I wasn't there to start problems. Later, I overheard my own mother talking to some older relatives. "Nathan? Oh, he just works a lot. Always busy. He doesn't really get the whole family thing." Someone chuckled and said, "Well, some people are just better off on their own. He's always been a bit distant, hasn't he?" I stood there, gripping my paper plate, watching the frosting on my cupcake tilt while my stomach churned. I hadn't spoken yet. I hadn't done anything. But somehow, I was still the odd one out. Still the punchline in a house I'd helped keep from collapsing more times than they knew. When I handed Lily my gift, She smiled politely and said, "Thanks. I think I already have one, though." She passed it off to her friend without even opening it. 10 minutes later, I heard her tell someone she wasn't expecting anything fancy from Nathan anyway. That was it. That was the moment. I didn't make a scene, didn't flip a table or shout or throw the gift back at her. I just quietly placed my plate in the trash, nodded to my grandmother, the only one who gave me a sincere smile that day, and left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say anything at all. They didn't text me that night or the next. No one asked if I was okay. No one noticed that the guy who'd been helping with bills, groceries, rent, and more, without ever being asked, had gone completely silent. 2 weeks later, my mom called me in a panic. "Nathan," she shrieked, her voice already raised. "We got something in the mail from the bank about the mortgage, something about missed payments. What's going on?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the screen, then slowly said, "I think you should check whose name the utilities and mortgage are under, and how long they've been paid through." There was silence, then more frantic questions. I hung up before answering any of them. That was the beginning of the unraveling, and they were about to learn in the harshest way just how much they'd taken for granted. But I'll tell you what happened next when you're ready. In the days that followed the baby shower, my phone blew up. Not from concern or apology, just noise. At first, it was my mom, confused and accusatory. "Why would we be getting letters from the bank?" she snapped in a voicemail. "This house has always been fine." Then came the texts. "Did you cancel something? What's going on? Did you mess with the accounts?" I ignored them. I wasn't ready. The truth was, for the past 3 years, I had been quietly paying the mortgage. When Grandma's health declined and her fixed income couldn't cover both her meds and the house, I stepped in. At first, it was just a few $100 here and there, but over time, I took over the full payment. I had set it all up through an automated plan under my name. The deed still listed my late grandfather, with everything pending probate that no one had bothered to finish. They didn't want the responsibility. They just wanted to live there. Utilities? I paid those, too. Especially after Mom fell behind, when Lily moved back in and Grandma started needing round-the-clock care. I had the login info for all the accounts. I knew the passwords. I'd been handling it all, silently, and they'd grown so comfortable with that silence. They mistook it for absence, for weakness. Now, with the payments suddenly frozen and no warning, reality was finally knocking at their door. But instead of acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, I had been doing more than they realized, they went on the attack. Mom left another voicemail that nearly made me laugh out loud. "I can't believe you're doing this to your own family. We're going to get evicted. Why would you just stop without telling anyone?" The gall. Like she expected a courtesy notice before I pulled my lifeline out from under their feet. Then Lily got involved. She texted me a long paragraph that read more like a lecture than a message. "If you had issues, you should have said something. This is supposed to be a happy time for me, and you're ruining it. I'm pregnant, Nathan. Do you even care what this stress is doing to me?" That last part stuck with me. Do you even care? I stared at those words, rereading them until the letters blurred. The same girl who never thanked me, who called me just to help during a Christmas party 2 years ago when her boyfriend asked what I did. Now she was accusing me of not caring. And just like that, any trace of guilt I had about pulling away completely vanished. Still, I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to make my move yet. I focused on work, on myself. For once, I let their chaos exist without me running to clean it up, and it showed. Within days, the power bill was overdue. Their Wi-Fi got cut off. The gas company left a final notice on the door. I knew because Grandma called, not to yell, but gently. "Nathan, sweetheart, I know you've been helping more than anyone knew. I'm sorry they never saw it. I just want you to know, I see you. I always have." Her words hit me harder than all the others combined. I offered to pay for her medication directly, nothing more. I made sure her account stayed current and that the pharmacy had her prescriptions ready, but I left the house itself to crumble under its own weight. A week later, I was ambushed at work. I was in the back unloading inventory when one of my coworkers said, "Hey man, there's a lady out front asking for you. Says she's your mom." I sighed, wiped my hands on my jeans, and headed out. Sure enough, there she was, standing by the counter, arms folded, eyes scanning every part of the store like she was above being there. When she saw me, she didn't even say hello. "We need to talk." Now, I glanced at my manager, who gave me a sympathetic look and nodded toward the break room. The moment the door closed, she let loose. "You need to fix this now. The bank says we're behind on 3 months of payments. They're talking about foreclosure. Your sister's crying every night. Your grandma's confused, and this is your fault. You can't just abandon your family like this." I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just said, calmly, "I didn't abandon anyone. I stopped carrying a load none of you ever asked about until it disappeared." She blinked, caught off guard. "I paid the mortgage. I paid the water, gas, internet. I paid the property taxes when you forgot. I paid for Grandma's insulin. I covered Lily's rent when she moved back in and stopped working for 6 months. I've been doing it all, Mom." Quietly, without a single thank you, without anyone offering to pitch in. And the one time I stop, I'm suddenly the villain. Her face twisted like she'd been slapped. "That's not fair," she snapped. "You never said no before." "Exactly," I said. "That was the problem. You all built your comfort on the assumption that I'd always just show up. Even when you ignored me, mocked me, forgot my birthday 3 years in a row, laughed behind my back at the baby shower. Do you know how humiliating that was? To hear my own mother say, 'I don't understand family,' while I'm the only one actually keeping this one standing." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I didn't ask for applause," I continued, "but I won't let you shame me for finally stepping away." She tried a new tactic. Tears. "You're breaking this family apart, Nathan." I looked her dead in the eye. "This family was broken long before I stopped paying the bills. You just didn't notice until the lights turned off." I walked out of the break room before she could respond. The fallout from that conversation spread like wildfire. Lily posted some vague nonsense online about being betrayed by people closest to you and how not everyone deserves a seat at the table. Her friends flooded the comments with pity and "stay strong, queen" garbage, completely unaware she was crying in a house she never paid a dime toward. Mom tried to guilt Grandma into talking to me, but Grandma had already made up her mind. She told me on the phone, "They don't deserve to lean on you anymore, sweetheart. Let them learn." And learn they would. Because just when they thought it couldn't get worse, just when the eviction notice arrived in a red envelope with an official stamp, I made a quiet phone call that would tip the scales completely. I didn't make that phone call out of spite, at least not at first. I called because I needed clarity. For years, I'd shouldered the responsibilities of that house without complaint. But now that the illusion had shattered, I wanted to know exactly where I stood. So, I contacted the probate attorney who'd handled my grandfather's estate, or tried to, anyway, before everything got delayed and brushed under the rug. The attorney remembered me. "Ah, Nathan, you were the one asking about the back taxes a few years ago, right?" "Yeah," I said, "and I'm the one who paid them." There was a pause on the other end. "Interesting, because as far as the records show, you were the only one who ever followed up." I explained the situation. How the house was still in limbo, how no one had finalized the inheritance, and how I'd been paying everything without being on any legal document except the utility accounts. "Well," he said after a moment, "the will your grandfather left. He named you as the primary heir, not your mother, not your sister. You." I froze. "What?" "It's all in the paperwork, the house, the land, everything. It was supposed to pass to you, but the estate was never officially closed. All it takes is one court visit and some paperwork. If you want to finalize it now, I can have the documents drawn up by the end of the week." I sat there in stunned silence, phone to my ear, while the world around me suddenly tilted. All these years, all the bills, the late nights, the exhaustion, and the house had been meant for me all along. "They never told me," I muttered. "My mom, Lily." No one said anything. "I'm not surprised," he replied gently. "It's not uncommon, especially when family politics get messy." That night, I barely slept. Not because I was conflicted, but because something finally clicked. The years of dismissal, the quiet jokes at my expense, the way they never included me in decisions about the house, they knew. Or at least Mom knew. She must have seen the will. She must have known I was the one Grandpa trusted with the house. And instead of telling me, instead of honoring his wishes, she just let me pay and pay and pay while treating me like a second-class guest in my own home. It was betrayal, cold, calculated, and it ran deeper than anything I'd expected. The next morning, I went to the county clerk's office. I submitted the paperwork, signed the necessary forms, and scheduled the court date. It was quiet, Simple, unceremonious. But when the judge banged the gavel and declared the transfer complete, I walked out with legal ownership of the property. That house, the one I grew up in, the one I'd fought to keep standing, was finally mine. 2 days later, I drove over. I didn't text, didn't warn them. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Lily's car, still dented on the side, just like it had been for months. Mom's car was parked crooked, half on the lawn. The porch light was off even though it was mid-afternoon, and a stack of unopened mail clung to the mailbox with a rubber band. I could feel the tension in the air before I even stepped out of the car. The door was unlocked. Inside, the living room was a mess. Baby stuff everywhere, crumpled receipts on the table, a half-eaten bowl of cereal by the couch. Lily sat in a recliner, scrolling on her phone with a deep frown. She looked up and rolled her eyes. "Oh, you." I ignored her and walked past, heading toward the kitchen where Mom stood at the sink, washing something with sharp, angry movements. She didn't turn when she heard me. "If you're here to lecture us again, don't bother. We're already drowning. Thanks to you." I dropped a manila envelope onto the counter. "What's this?" she asked, drying her hands and opening it. She skimmed the first page, then the second, and then her face paled. This can't be real," she whispered. "It's the court order," I said calmly. "The house is legally mine now. Grandpa left it to me. The will was never finalized, but I just took care of that." Mom's lips parted, but no sound came out. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked, voice low and steady. "You saw the will. You knew it wasn't yours to claim. But you let me pay for everything anyway. You lied by omission. And now you're standing in a house that doesn't belong to you." Lily stormed in behind me, voice sharp and rising. "You're kicking out a pregnant woman? Seriously? What kind of brother does that?" I turned to her slowly. "The kind who's been treated like a wallet for 6 years while being told he's not really part of the family." She laughed bitterly. "So this is revenge. You think this makes you some kind of hero?" "No," I said, stepping forward. "This makes me the owner, and I've got decisions to make." The air went still. Mom sat down hard on a chair, holding the paperwork with trembling hands. Lily kept ranting, saying things like, "I'll go to court," and "You're heartless." But none of it landed. None of it mattered anymore. I looked at both of them and saw it clearly for the first time. Not just the betrayal, but the pattern. I had always been the safety net, the invisible support, the shadow they could lean on and step over at the same time. But I wasn't that person anymore. I left the papers on the counter. "You have until the end of the week." And then I walked out, the door closing behind me with a finality that echoed through the house. But what came next? That's where things really started to unravel. After I left the house that day, I parked 2 blocks away and just sat in my car. No music, no calls, just me and my own thoughts swirling in silence. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. I had done the responsible thing. I protected what Grandpa left me. I stood up for myself, and I finally confronted the people who had taken advantage of me for years. But instead, all I felt was hollow. It hit me harder than I expected. The weight of what I'd done. Not the ownership part. Not even the eviction warning. It was the silence. The realization that my family had never really been a family. At least not to me. For them, family meant access, convenience, someone to fix things when they fell apart. When I went home that night, I stared at the walls of my apartment, the one-bedroom place I'd lived in quietly for 4 years while still paying for the mortgage of the family home I wasn't welcome in. I'd kept it modest, second-hand couch, small dining table, a few framed photos of Grandpa and me on a fishing trip. No one had ever visited, not once. I sat at the edge of my bed and scrolled through my messages. Nothing from Mom, nothing from Lily, not even a fake apology, just radio silence. And for a brief second, I wondered if I had gone too far, if I'd let bitterness guide me. Then I opened my budgeting app and looked at the last few months of transactions. Nearly 70% of my take-home pay had been going to support them. 70%. I wasn't bitter. I was just done bleeding for people who'd never even noticed I was hurting. Still, that hollow feeling lingered. The next morning, I got a call from the assisted care facility I had been eyeing for Grandma. "Hi, Nathan. We have a spot opening up at the end of next month. If you're still interested, we'd love to meet with your grandmother and go over the details." I scheduled the appointment immediately. If I was going to cut myself loose from that house, I had to make sure Grandma was safe first. She was the only one who never mocked me, never asked for anything. She always offered what little she had, even if it was just a warm smile or a cup of tea when I looked tired. But even that didn't go smoothly. When I called to tell her about the opening and asked if she wanted to visit the place, her voice sounded nervous. Quiet. I'd love to, sweetheart, but your mother's been acting strange lately. Ever since you left that paperwork, she barely speaks to me, and she hides the mail when it comes. I don't think she wants me going anywhere. I felt my jaw tighten. She's what? I'm okay, Grandma said quickly, as if to soften the blow. But I can tell she's angry. And Lily hasn't spoken a word to me since you came by. I think they blame me for something. Of course they did. I hadn't even considered that they'd try to isolate her as a way to punish me. But it made sense. Grandma had always been the closest to me, and now that I was holding the power, they needed a scapegoat inside the house. That night, I sat down with a legal pad and started writing everything out. Not emotionally, just practically. What needed to happen next? Who needed to be notified? What resources I needed to line up? I called the care facility again, asked about transportation services. I even emailed the attorney to ask about securing the property and what my rights were as the owner if the residents refused to leave. I didn't want to kick them out onto the street, but I couldn't leave Grandma in that toxic environment. And I couldn't keep pouring time and energy into people who thought of me as nothing but an ATM with a pulse. And yet, even as I planned the next steps, the emotional toll weighed me down. At work, I found myself zoning out during meetings. I dropped a box of product in the stockroom one afternoon and just stood there staring at the broken glass until a coworker snapped me out of it. My appetite was shot. I'd sit with food in front of me for 20 minutes and barely touch it. It wasn't the money or even the betrayal. It was the grief. The grief of realizing your family never really saw you. That for them, love had terms, respect had conditions, and loyalty was expected, not earned. I didn't cry, not really. But one night, I was organizing a drawer and came across an old Polaroid from when I was 10. It was me and Lily on the front porch. She was holding a popsicle and grinning. I had my arm around her like I was the proud big brother, even though she was 2 years older. I stared at it for a long time, thumb tracing the edges. How do we go from that to this? The next morning, I woke up early and drove to the house again. Not to fight, not to lecture, just to see. I parked across the street and watched for a while. It was quiet, too quiet. Curtains drawn, no movement. After about 20 minutes, I saw Mom step outside with a trash bag. She looked thinner, frazzled. She dumped the bag into the bin and went back in without noticing me. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to keep circling them hoping they'd finally treat me with decency. I wasn't going to wait for gratitude that would never come. I was going to secure Grandma's future. I was going to finalize the transition of the property. And after that, I was going to sell it, let them figure out what real family means without me. But before I could make my final moves, something unexpected happened. Something that changed everything and sent the situation spiraling into dangerous territory. Things started shifting the moment I committed to walking away. It didn't happen all at once, more like slow, deliberate steps after years of standing still. The first came that weekend. I took Grandma to visit the assisted living facility. I picked her up myself, making sure to call ahead so Mom couldn't interfere. When I arrived at the house, Grandma was already waiting at the curb in her sweater and walking shoes, her small overnight bag sitting beside her. She gave me a tired smile, eyes a little misty. "You ready?" I asked, offering my arm. "More than you know," she whispered. I helped her into the car, and we drove in silence for a bit. The tension didn't fully leave her shoulders until we pulled out of the neighborhood. Only then did she relax, like she had been holding her breath for weeks. She told me that things inside the house had grown colder, that Mom and Lily barely spoke to her unless they needed something, that they tiptoed around her, not out of care, but like she was a burden they hadn't figured out how to get rid of. It made my chest tighten with anger, but I didn't let it show. The facility, by contrast, was warm, bright, cheerful. They had a community garden, a reading room, even a weekly shuttle to town for shopping. When we toured her potential apartment, a cozy corner unit with a small balcony and a view of the trees, she ran her fingers over the windowsill and said almost to herself, "He would have loved this." She meant Grandpa. We stayed for lunch and met some of the staff. By the end of the visit, Grandma turned to me and said, "If you can make this work, I'd be happy here." That was all I needed. I paid the deposit out of my savings that same day. It was the most expensive decision I'd made all year, but the most satisfying one, too. I gave the staff her medical history, dietary needs, prescriptions, and an emergency contact number, mine. And for the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt like I was doing something for me, something right. The next step was the house. I met with a real estate agent the following Monday. She was efficient, sharp, and didn't bat an eye when I told her it was still occupied. Not for long, I added. She walked the property with me, took notes, and said, "It's got good bones. Some updates needed, sure, but this location? Easily 6 figures. You'll want to get them out soon, though. Can't sell it with a circus going on inside." I nodded. "I'm working on it. Legally, I couldn't force an immediate eviction unless they caused damage or refused to leave after official notice. So, I filed the paperwork, 30 days to vacate, and made sure it was hand-delivered with a witness present. No loopholes, no excuses. At work, things picked up, too. I'd been grinding quietly for years. The guy who always took the late shifts, the holidays, the double duty when someone called out. I never asked for recognition. But after my store manager saw how I'd handled the property situation, calm, methodical, not getting emotional, even when ambushed, he called me into his office. "You ever thought about moving up?" he asked. "We're opening a new branch across town next quarter. You've got leadership material. People respect you. You don't cause drama." That last part made me smirk. "I'm interested," I said simply. He nodded. "I'll put your name in for assistant manager. It's a bump in pay and hours, but you'd be running your own team. Think about it." I didn't have to. I took the offer 2 days later. With the promotion came better income. Not life-changing, but enough to feel real breathing room. I updated my apartment, added a proper desk for the first time, and replaced my lumpy mattress with one that didn't feel like a punishment. I even got a gym membership and started going 3 times a week just to move and clear my head. Every small change felt like a middle finger to the version of me who used to come home exhausted and broke after covering someone else's bills. And as for Lily and Mom, oh, they noticed. Mom left voicemails now, long ones, apologizing sort of. "I didn't realize how much you were doing," she'd say. Or, "I never meant to make you feel left out." But it always circled back to the same thing. "Can we talk? Can you reconsider? Can we figure something out?" Lily tried a different tactic. She showed up at my job one day, pregnant, belly visible now, arms folded across her chest like a shield. "I know we've had problems," she said, standing by the registers. "But you don't have to ruin us. That house is the only thing we have, and you don't even need it. You live in some crappy little apartment and work retail. Why take this from us?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Because it's mine. Grandpa left it to me. And instead of honoring that, you all used me until I stopped being useful." Her face twisted in disbelief, like she couldn't comprehend that I was saying it out loud now, that I wasn't the silent mule anymore. I walked away, let my co-workers escort her out. A week later, I moved Grandma into her new home. She cried when we wheeled her inside, not from sadness, but relief. The staff greeted her like family. Her room was filled with light. I stocked her fridge with her favorite yogurts and left a small framed photo of her and Grandpa on the dresser. That night, I slept better than I had in months. And then came the final letter, a certified copy of the eviction notice, stamped and delivered. 30 days. That was the legal grace period. But I knew they wouldn't go quietly, especially because I just learned something new, something about the house's value that changed everything. And the second I confirmed it, I knew exactly how I'd deliver the final blow. About 2 weeks after Grandma settled into her new place, I got a call from my real estate agent. I had just finished locking up the store for the night and was walking to my car when her name lit up my screen. "Hey, Nathan," she said, a little breathless. "You're going to want to sit down. Did the roof collapse?" I joked. She laughed. "No, better. You remember how I said the location was good?" "Yeah. Well, I just got off the phone with the developer. Apparently, the city council approved plans to rezone that entire block. They're turning it into a mixed-use development area. Retail on the bottom, condos on top. Your house, it's sitting right on a planned access road. They're estimating property value in that pocket is about to double, maybe even triple." I stopped walking, hand tightening on my keys. "You serious?" "Dead serious. And get this. That same developer might be interested in buying now before the rezoning spikes the tax bracket. You'd be in a perfect position to negotiate. But you've got to get them out of there first." My heart was pounding. For years, that house had been a weight around my neck. A place filled with tension and bitterness and thankless responsibility. But now it was leverage. Not just emotionally, financially. It was power. I could sell the house for a life-changing amount, pay off my debts, put a down payment on a better apartment, maybe even buy my own place, start something new on my terms. Or I could lease it back to the developer, take equity, ride the project up. Options I'd never had before, all from the one place where I was never seen as anything but a spare wallet. I called the attorney again the next day, asked about accelerating the eviction. If they leave the house in poor condition or if they refuse to comply with the notice, you can file for an expedited order, he explained. But it's cleaner if they leave willingly. I nodded, though I knew already they weren't leaving willingly. Still, I had to try one more time. If not for them, then for Grandma's peace of mind. So, I wrote a letter. Not a cold legal one, a real one. 3 paragraphs, typed, direct. Mom, Lily, as you're aware, the house is no longer yours. I have honored every legal step. I've paid every overdue bill. I've supported this home and its residents long after I stopped being welcomed in it. But this ends now. You have 2 options. Leave quietly within the next 10 days, and I'll give you each a small relocation stipend. No strings, just enough to get on your feet. Or, stay past the deadline, and I will file for forced removal through the court. You'll leave with nothing and a record. You don't have to like me, but you will respect what I've done and what I'm capable of. Nathan. I mailed it, registered, tracked, and then I waited. During that wait, things in my life started accelerating. Almost like the universe was finally making room for me. I got confirmation that my assistant manager promotion came with a transfer to the newer store closer to my apartment, better hours, better team. I said yes without hesitation. I enrolled in 2 online courses, one in real estate fundamentals and another in small business finance. For the first time in years, I had mental energy again. I wasn't just surviving, I was building. Even socially, things changed. A coworker, Sarah, started chatting with me more during shifts. She noticed I brought lunch from home one day and said, "You cook? That's rare." We laughed. She joked about how she burned instant noodles. Then we had lunch again the next day and the next. It was nothing serious yet, but it was something. Then, 10 days after I sent the letter, the storm came. I got home from work and found my apartment door covered in sticky notes. Angry, childish ones. You're disgusting. Rotten. Go to hell. You betrayed your family. Hope the money keeps you warm. I peeled them off one by one, feeling oddly calm. I recognized Lily's handwriting. Some were from Mom, too. She had this dramatic cursive that always looped the Y in my name like she was signing a yearbook. They weren't subtle, but they were a gift because tucked between those notes, possibly by accident, was a folded receipt from a pawn shop. I opened it, and my stomach turned. It listed a sale dated 2 days ago, jewelry, rings, earrings, 1 pearl necklace, under Lily's name. The items matched Grandma's heirlooms. I'd seen them in a glass box on her dresser just a week before when helping her unpack at the facility. I called Grandma immediately. "Do you still have your jewelry box?" I asked gently. Silence, then. "Oh, I hadn't even thought to look. I assumed it was packed." She paused. "Wait, no? It wasn't with the rest." "Nathan, you don't think?" "I'm afraid I do." That was the last straw. This wasn't just entitlement. It wasn't just manipulation. It was theft from a woman who had shown nothing but kindness, from her own daughter and granddaughter. They crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And I suddenly had more than just legal leverage. I had criminal leverage. I contacted the pawn shop, confirmed the transaction, took down the clerk's name. Then I filed a police report, not because I wanted them arrested, but because I wanted it documented, filed, logged, something I could slide across a judge's desk if it came to that. By the end of that week, I had 3 powerful things: legal ownership of the property, an imminent buyer offering well above market price, and evidence of criminal misconduct by the current occupants. And that's when I made the final move. I scheduled a meeting. Neutral ground, a quiet booth in a diner across town. I texted Mom and Lily the time and location. I didn't say what it was about. They showed up late. Lily looked angry. Mom looked tired. Before either could speak, I slid a folder across the table. Inside were 3 things: a copy of the police report, the developer's offer letter, and a printed screenshot of the eviction deadline. Mom paled. Lily scoffed. This is pathetic. No, I said, this is real. You've got 72 hours left. I can press charges, or you can walk away with a check. One time, no second chances. They stared at me like they didn't recognize who I was. And honestly, they didn't. Because the Nathan they remembered, the quiet one, the easy one, the invisible one, was gone. I had power now, and I was about to use it. They didn't take the deal. Of course, they didn't. After everything, the warnings, the notices, the letter, the police report, they still thought they could win. Lily rolled her eyes and shoved the folder back across the diner table. "We're not signing anything," she said, her voice loud enough to make the couple in the next booth glance over. "You think just because you got lucky with some zoning loophole and a dead man's will, you're the king of the world now." Mom was quieter, but her tone was even colder. "You'd really do this to your own family? Sell the house out from under your sister? Evict your mother after all we've done for you?" I didn't flinch. I just folded the folder back up and tucked it under my arm. "All right," I said, standing. "See you in court." I walked away without looking back. The next morning, I went to the courthouse with every document I'd prepared. The will, the deed transfer, the payment records, photos of the pawn receipt, a copy of the eviction notice, the filed police report. By the time I was done presenting everything to the clerk and the magistrate, I was granted expedited removal. An officer would be assigned to serve them the final 48-hour notice. If they weren't out, they'd be forcibly removed. But I didn't stop there. The pawnshop incident had opened another door, and I planned to walk right through it. With Grandma's permission, I contacted the shop owner directly. I explained the situation, provided the police report, and asked if he could hold the items until we resolved the theft. He was hesitant, but after speaking with the detective assigned to the case, he agreed. I then had a lawyer, a friend of a coworker, draft a civil complaint. Theft of property, emotional distress, damages for fraud and deception. It wasn't meant to bankrupt them, but it sent a message. You took something sacred, and you're not walking away untouched. Meanwhile, back at the house, things were unraveling fast. Lily posted a long, dramatic rant on Facebook about toxic brothers and jealous men who think money makes them better than blood. She painted herself as a victim. Pregnant, scared, abandoned. Comments poured in from people who didn't know the full story. "Stay strong, girl. You're doing amazing, sweetie. Cut him off. You don't need that kind of negativity." But then something shifted. One comment stood out. "Wait, isn't that your grandma's house? The one your brother's been paying for? Didn't he cover your rent for like a year?" Someone else chimed in. "I thought your mom said he was the one who paid the mortgage." Then another. "Didn't you pawn your grandma's necklace?" I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Word spread quietly at first, then steadily. The people who mattered, family, friends, church acquaintances, even her old high school best friend, started backing away. No more sympathy, just silence. And then came the eviction day. I didn't go in person. I sent my lawyer. They resisted, of course, refused to open the door. But the officers were patient. By hour 4, Lily was crying on the porch, arms wrapped around a laundry basket of clothes. Mom stood beside her, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, clutching a cardboard box filled with mismatched mugs and a half-burnt candle. They were allowed to take what belonged to them, which, as it turned out, wasn't much. I had already secured Grandma's things. Everything else, furniture I bought, appliances I replaced, rugs and shelves and curtains I installed with my own hands. They left the house nearly empty, and I didn't let them back in after that. 2 days later, I walked through the house alone. It smelled stale, like old perfume and stress, but it was quiet, peaceful mine. I opened the windows, let the light in, and turned on every lamp. Then I called the developer. "Let's talk numbers." The offer had risen since the rezoning news spread. What started as a 6-figure bid had grown into a bidding war. By the end of the week, I had a signed agreement, a closing date, and a check that was more than I'd earned in the last 5 years combined. I stood in the driveway on the final day, keys in hand, watching the sun set behind the house I once dreaded walking into. A car slowed as it passed, not theirs, just a stranger. But I found myself hoping for a second it was them, that they could see what I'd become, that the boy who sat in the corner, forgotten and useful only when convenient, was now the one holding the deed, the pen, the power. Instead, I looked at the keys one last time and dropped them into the realtor's hand. It was done, and yet, I wasn't finished just yet. Because what happened after the sale? Well, that was when everything truly came full circle. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was quiet, slow, the kind of unraveling that happens in silence, behind closed doors, where bitterness festers and regret has no one left to lash out at but itself. A week after the house sale closed, I got a text from an unknown number. No name, just hope you're proud. We're staying at a motel. Lily's due in 3 weeks. Mom cries every night. I stared at it for a long time. No apology, no ownership, just a guilt trip wrapped in passive-aggressive pity. The old me might have replied, might have offered help, or at least an explanation, but I just deleted the message and blocked the number. Meanwhile, Grandma was thriving. Her new apartment had become her sanctuary. She joined a book club, made friends with a woman named Edith who taught her how to play bridge, and was walking more now than she had in years. Every Sunday, we had lunch together in the courtyard. We'd talk about small things, her garden, my new position at work, what movies were playing. But the peace in her eyes said more than any words could. I brought her the pearl necklace the pawn shop returned. When I opened the little velvet box, she gasped and covered her mouth. They didn't get away with it, I said softly. None of it. She hugged me then, tighter than I expected. He'd be proud of you, she whispered. Your grandfather. So proud. I believed her. Word of the house sale spread through the extended family. A few cousins reached out, most of them careful and polite now. They wanted to reconnect. One uncle emailed me asking if I had any investment tips since I seemed to be doing well lately. I ignored them. I didn't need a crowd, just clarity and maybe peace. As for Mom and Lily, the consequences came faster than they expected. When Lily finally gave birth, it was in a crowded county hospital. No baby shower gifts, no flowers, just her and Mom and the cold realization that bridges once burned don't rebuild themselves overnight. They tried to move in with a distant cousin, but word had spread about the police report, about the pawn shop, about how I'd been the one supporting them for years without credit. No one wanted to get pulled into that mess. They bounced between cheap motels and borrowed couches, always just one step from the street. Eventually, I heard through Grandma that they'd left town. No forwarding address, no goodbye, just gone. And I didn't chase them. Instead, I used part of the money from the house to start something I'd dreamed about quietly for years, my own logistics consulting business. Nothing flashy, just me, my laptop, a small office space, and a growing list of clients who actually respected my time and knowledge. Within 6 months, I was making more than I ever had in retail. Within a year, I hired my first employee. I upgraded my apartment, traveled for the first time in my adult life, took Grandma to the beach, her first vacation since Grandpa passed. Life moved forward. It wasn't revenge for the sake of revenge. It was correction, realignment, reclaiming everything I'd been told I wasn't allowed to have. Respect, peace, freedom. And as I stood outside my office one morning, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the city I had once felt so small in, I thought back to that baby shower, to the laughter, the whispers, the way they all said I'd never understand what real family means. And now I do. Real family doesn't come with conditions. Real family doesn't use you, then shame you when you stop giving. Real family is the one you protect, even when they never protected you. That was my final lesson, and I learned it the hard way.